We're gonna give a few seconds for everybody to start coming in. All right. Well, hello everybody. My name is Thiago. I am the Customer Success Manager here at TagoIO. I will be starting the presentation for the webinar part 2 and coding scripts to scale up IoT applications. In this webinar, we're going to be covering coding scripts to deploy your application using TagoRUN that manages end user signed up, dashboard, and device allocations, all using TagoRUN module. Just a reminder, feel free to present yourselves here in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can always sign up for the Q&A in this webinar. We're going to be uploading this video later. In case some of you did not participate in part 1, we already have available on our website. And we're going to be uploading part 2 as well. I'm going to be handing over to Victor. He's our developer here at TagoIO, and he's going to be instructing us on how to build complete applications. Victor?
Hello, everyone. My name is Victor. Worked with developing applications at Tago in the last 5 years or 6. So in this webinar, we will be talking about analysis, the tokens that we use to be able to create, delete, and edit your resources in Tago. Also our actions, and we also will have a demo with a dashboard to generate devices in our account. This is a continuation of the part 1. So the part 1 of webinar was regarding the basics, so we can understand how everything works on Tago and the architecture. And this one is more to, I start using analysis to automatize everything that we talked about in the part 1. So let's start with our agenda. So the first thing we will talk about is the analysis overview and understand how analysis works. Then we will talk about the tokens. So TagoIO has several tokens that we need to use to have access to different resources. And we also will talk about the Node.JS SDK documentation. That is important for us to understand what we can do inside the analysis. And then analysis context and scope. There is 2 important fields inside the analysis, actions and widgets. And for less external analysis, so we can understand how to build our analysis and upload to Tago. And for last, we have the Q&A, where we can do some questions, and I will try to do my best to answer you. Okay, so talking about analysis, analysis is basically a script that is inside your profile. And this script can be triggered several ways. It can be set to be triggered by an action or a widget, or even another analysis can trigger your own analysis. So actions will allow us to have the analysis triggered by schedule or from a MQTT topic or when a variable arrives. And widgets can trigger your analysis when you edit a field in a dashboard, for example. And it's very important to understand that the analysis needs something to trigger the script to run. So just by creating the analysis, it will not run. You need to have some way to trigger it. The analysis script can also be built in Node.JS or Python. The difference basically is that the Node.js can be built. That means you can generate a webpack and upload to Tago containing different libraries. And the Python code, you cannot use external libraries that is not supported inside the analysis. So this is the basic difference here. The analysis also can be set to run externally, and we will talk later about running externally, but basically it's a very important feature so you can make use of some IDE, for example, Visual Studio Code, and you can have debugger tools to get through your analysis. And the most important, of course, is to be able to build your analysis in your computer, use third-party libraries, and then build your analysis and upload to Tago. And for any of the actions that you want to do regarding creating users, creating devices, you need to use the TagoIO SDK. Okay, so let's talk about the tokens. TagoIO has inside 4 different token types, and these tokens is used to authorize you to be able to manage some kind of resource inside Tago. So talking about the first token, we have the account token. So with this token that you can find inside your profile settings inside Tago, using this token, you can create, delete, edit the files, devices, even your run settings or manage your run users inside your run. Can create, delete buckets, notifications, dashboards, widgets, and actions. So it's the most powerful token in your account. And for example, you can create a device or get even the device tokens from a device. So you will be using a lot of this token inside your analysis if you want to automatize things. Okay, next one is the device token. So this is basically to manage the data inside from one of your devices. By using the device token, you are only able to get, send, and delete data from a specific device in your account. So very common to do is to use the account token to find your device, get the device token from that device, and next use the device token to access the data from the device. A lot of analysis examples do that, as I will show you later. Next one is the network token. So the network token is only used if you create a network on Tago inside the integrations page. And what the network token do is that it give access to any device token created under that network. So very good if you want to have your own network or just have want to have some way to find your devices using the serial. And of course, the network token will need you to provide a serial and a authorization from the account you are trying to looking for devices. Last one, we have the analysis tokens. So the analysis token, when you create an analysis, and set it to run externally, you will see this token available. And with this token, you can, of course, connect the code in your machine directly to Tago. But you can also use some other services like sending SMS and sending emails. Also have some options for notifications. Uh, so if you want to do that, you need to use analysis token. I believe that's all regarding the tokens. Let's move next. Okay, so when we start to use analysis, the first thing we want to make sure we have some understanding is how our TagoIO SDK works. So the SDK has all the functions from anything in our web application. So if even our web application, when we try to create a device, is actually using our SDK. So you will see all the functions regarding creating, deleting, editing, and the listing, of course, resources from Tago. So in the SDK, you will notice that we do some importings. And this importing, like account analysis device, is actually requires you to use an account token or a device token or a network token. So for example, here when we import devices from our SDK and we instance our class here, we actually need to send a token, in this case it's a device token, in order to be able to start using the functions we have inside our SDK. And of course, since it's a SDK, it's not meant to be used only inside the analysis. You can also use for your personal projects if you want to. Okay, so inside the analysis, we will always have a function that will receive the parameter context and scope. And you will see this in all the examples. It is required in order to, for you to be able to write your code. And I want to talk about a little bit about what exactly this two parameter means. So the context parameter, that is the first parameter from your function. Later I will show all this in the demo. So just a quick introduction here. The context, the first parameter is basically talking about the context that this analysis did run. So inside it, it will always be a JSON, object.json, and you will have access to your environment variables that you set up in your analysis. You will have even additional environment variables with the context of the triggers that occurred for your analysis. That means you will see if the analysis was triggered by an action, you will have the action ID, the action resource, the action variable, etc. If it's a widget, you have the widget ID, the dashboard ID, and bottom IDs, etc. that is configured from the widget. And you also will have your analysis ID and your analysis token available in the context. In this case, analysis token is to help you when you want to send SMS and email, so you can get this token from the context always. Next parameter is the scope. So the scope is what triggered your analysis. So it's basically containing the information that was responsible for the trigger. When we talk about actions, for example, the scope will always be the data. For example, if you set up a trigger for variable, the scope will contain the variable that triggered the analysis. And for example, if you have an action by resource that triggers when a user is greeted, so the scope will have the information of the user that was greeted and trigger the action. So you can have this in this parameter, the device, the user, you can have the data or the group of data that triggered the analysis. And regarding MQTT, you will also have the MQTT message with topic, message, and QoS that would trigger this analysis. So you have actions and widgets. And just freezing exactly what I talked in the last slide. It's a way to trigger your analysis. You need to have a way to trigger your analysis. Keep that in mind. And both will load the content of the trigger to analysis scope and will load the settings of the trigger to the analysis context. And we have two examples here. So you can see we have a action by variable that will trigger when temperature arrives to this device and will run our analysis. So this is one way to set up this trigger. Another trigger from the widget is from the input form. And when we click in the submit button, you'll have this option to run analysis. And you select which analysis you want to run every time someone clicks in the submit button. Now talking about external analysis, so you can see we have an example here of the analysis running on my terminal here. So I highly recommend you to try external. We have a documentation for you to install Node and NPM, instructions on how you download your first scripts and try to use it. I'll try to show later, but it's very helpful to have visual code, for example, helping you developing your code with auto-completion and debugger tools to help you. And of course, if you don't want to keep the code inside Tago or want to run in an external machine on AWS or something else, you can also set to run external. And it's useful when sometimes you are trying to do something that cannot be run inside Tago because TagoIO has a memory size for your analysis that you cannot go higher. And you also have runtime limits. The analysis will be killed if your analysis takes more than 2 minutes to run. So having these options is very good. Okay, so I want to go to the demo. Let me get here. So what we will be doing today is to create this this dashboard here. So let me check. So in this dashboard, we will create to have a device list and a, let me fix this dashboard first. I believe I need to have a settings device here. Yeah. But I will do this dashboard from the beginning. So we have a device list where we can see devices from or directly from our device resource, and we can also create devices from this dashboard. So all this will need you to have an analysis to automatize this farm, for example, and ways to trigger your analysis. And with that, you can basically set up for your customers to be able to create their own devices and see other devices in a list. You can also do that if you want to create your devices automatically with a given tags based on what you selected from these drop downs. So several use cases and a very good example to show you how this widgets works and how to trigger analysis and get all the information that was filled up from this form inside the analysis to take your actions. So let's start from the beginning. I will delete this dashboard. Also, I'll start the analysis from the beginning. Okay. So once you have your device set up, from the part one, for example, you can and should start to create your dashboards and analysis. And of course, one way is to set up a way to create your devices. And we can have a snippet example here to do that. So I'll click on add the analysis here and give a name for my analysis. Let's say create devices. And here I can select my runtime. It can be Node.js, Python, or other. So I'll be using Node.js here. I can set to run on Tago, and I can select one of my one of the snippets that Tago provides. So for this example, we will have the create devices using dashboard, but I want to start with hello world for now. Okay, so here we have the screen of the analysis. So a lot of instructions around here. Inside, you will have your code, okay? You also have a button to upload a code from your machine if you want to. And on the other side, you have the name. You can change here if you want to run external or inside Tago. You can copy your analysis token for you or generate a new one if you want to run externally. And you also have this console. Down here, you can press to save your analysis. When you just edit it, you can also press to run, and then it will trigger your analysis in a manually way. And here you can see the console regarding the consoles from my code. So I can see my context here. So everything I mentioned before is a JSON. You have the token of the analysis. You have a list of your environment variables that is empty, and my analysis ID. And regarding my scope, I don't have anything, but let me give an example. So this is just a code to convert your variable from JSON to a string. Okay, and now you have this engineering here. You can have the basic example. So what this do is that we will load something to this scope. So it's a way for you to test your analysis without trying to create the triggering way. And from here, you can just simulate and do exactly what you would expect when you receive data, for example. So here is just some data. Press save and run. Now you can see my scope contains all the information regarding this, what I set here for demo. And we can have an input form sample that we get like that. We can also have our own way to set up data, for example. I can just start writing here. When I press run, it will be sent. So this is very open for you, specifically because you can trigger your analysis from another analysis, and you can set your own scope if you do that. Now, talking about the code. So first line here in this hello world example, we are importing the modules we want from our SDK. So let's check the modules we have. Let's overview here. Have the SDK documentation. So, we have quite a few modules here. We have the account model, analysis, authorization, device, dictionary, run user, and services. Run user, you probably will never want to use inside the analysis. This is just when you are logging in as an user, and you may find useful if you are using outside Tago for a different project. You have services here that will allow you to use the analysis token in order to send SMS, email. You'll have the account, and if I click on the account, you'll see you have additional property here for basically all my resources. So I have, with the account token, I can manage the profile, run, tags, a dictionary, my devices, dashboard, buckets, analysis, actions. And if I go to one of them, for example, actions, I will have even more options inside the actions because I can create, delete, edit, get the information, or list my actions. And so these are the methods. And I want to go back a little bit just to show you how this works. So we are importing our modules here. So if I want to import the account, I'll just enter the account here. Let's say I want to import the services. I can just write services here. Okay. Next, we have a function. So you always need a function to run your analysis. And this function needs to accept context and scope. Of course, you can have more functions here inside the code, but you need an initial function that if you look at the end here, you see we need to use this initial function for our analysis export here. So this is a very basic code that we will have in all your analysis. So by receiving context and scope, I'm just doing some logs here and say, oh, this is my parameter, my content for context, my content for scope, and telling you that the analysis did run. So very quickly on that, let me get the create device using dashboard now. So, and this analysis is much more complex, and you have some encode comments here. and you can check that we are importing several services like we choose device account and analysis. So before starting here, I want to talk specifically about the function that we see from the SDK. So we can see we are importing the account, and for all the modeling classes that we have, you need to instance this class using new account. If you go back to the documentation and click in the account here, you'll have, you can see the account has a constructor, and when you click the constructor, it shows exactly how you need to write your code to generate this. So you need to use new account, and you can send region and token as an optional parameter here. Actually, token is required, and region you probably will not be using for now. So only the token is enough. So you have the new account token, and this is exactly the same if you want to use device. So if I get the device model here, here. So line 39, new device, and also you send the token parameter. Next thing, we have the utus. So utus is not do not require you to use this new option. Utus is just a list of functions, and these functions are very useful to help you through your coding. If I go to the utus here in the documentation, you can see there's a different color. So you have actually three functions for now. That is to convert your environment variables to a JSON, and we'll see the environment variables in a few minutes. You can get the API version, or you can also get token by name from a device ID, which is what we use most from the utus library. And you can see it being used here, where we need to enter our account parameter and the origin of our scope. So scope is the data that we receive from our input form. We can get the position 0. Actually, we want any position. And we can get the origin, as you will see here on my scope later. The origin contains the ID of your device. Okay with that? Let's start to build the application. Okay, so from here we have some instructions. So the first instructions tell us to get a dashboard template. So I can copy that, or just try to click it. And it will give me a blueprint dashboard template for which to start to use. So I click install. This is a blueprint dashboard. So we will have a blueprint device and a tag key and a tag value of a device that we need for this dashboard. And if you go back to the analysis, it actually telling us to use a dummy HTTPS device. So last webinar, I mentioned that. The dummy device is just a device that you want to use to store configurations. You can do that. And the best connector that you can use for dummy device is the custom HTTPS because it does not have any decoder on it. So it will not mess up when you try to update your configuration variables, and will not have any code trying to parse something. So I do have a dummy device. Let me get back here. That is the settings device here. and also have the tag type settings that is required here from this Blueprint dashboard. So I can click Confirm Associations. And now we have our dashboard. So you can see I have my device showing up in this drop-down. So in my case here, I will have only one device for settings. So I can edit this dashboard and go to Blueprint settings and set this to not show if there's no more than one device. Okay, so we hide it. Next thing we want to do here in this dashboard is to edit. Go to this tab called Create, and I want to edit this widget. So we need to understand how the widget works in order to understand what our analysis will do, because the analysis basically makes use of all the information from this widget in order to create your device, correct? So I'll explain the fields here. So this is an input form. So it's just a form you can create, and you have several options for each field. And when you enter a field, I'll click on it for you to see. You will select the data from, so we select the Blueprint device settings and the variable device name. And the variable here is important because when we go to the analysis, we receive the variable device name in your scope. And we can find in your scope for this variable and get exactly the device name that was entered for this field when the user pressed the submit button. We also have the field type, and we can change here if you want to. So it's a text and have additional information here about how this field should behave. Next, we have the network. So network, also variable device network, it's a drop-down. And the drop-down need to be filled up with content, right? So down here you have the use value from options, and you can configure the options. And you will see that for generic endpoint, it's just a label that will show up for your user. And you have actually a value that will be sent to your analysis. So when the user selects generic endpoint for creating the device, you will find in the device network variable from the scope this value here. And what is this value? Let's say I want to give support for TTN, example here, or Evernet. I need to have these IDs from these networks. And we will see later that the creating device function requires us to send ID from a network and ID from a connector. So let me show the connector quickly here. So it's the same thing, device connector variable, configure the option, and you have an ID for custom sensor. So let me show you where this information is. I go back to my device list here, press edit the device, and if I go here to my network generic endpoint, you can see that in the URL, I already have the ID from this network. And if I click on HTTPS, I actually have a different ID that is from the HTTPS network. So here is where you get the ID for a network. And if I then click on my connector, you can see we have now the network ID here, and we have the connector ID here. So here is where you can get these IDs for you to create your devices. A very cool example is entering Evernet here. I can see have the network ID. And if I select, for example, Adonis Comfort, the first connector here, we have the connector ID that is N-Tweet 55. and the network ID. So in some cases, the connector is shared with other networks. So if I go to Helium and try to select the Advanced Comfort, you actually see the connector ID do not change. So you can use the same connector and only change the network ID. Just some tips when you try to build your devices. Now going back to the dashboard, we have a different field called QR code, where the user should enter the device UI. And by selecting the field type QR code, they also have the option to scan the QR code. And last one is the validation field. We created a variable called validation. We have this field type validation here. And what this is. So the validation allows us to send feedback for our customers from our analysis. So inside our analysis, if we send data to this validation field here, variable here, the content of our variable that we send will show up as a box, a feedback box for our customers. So if I go back, another important thing is the create button. So you have the send to bucket. We want to disable that. We don't want to store this information on Tago, right? We only want the user to fill up and send the information to our analysis. I also need to select my analysis here, create devices, okay. And I have some other fields like wait for validation to unlock. So it will lock the button and the user will not be able to click again until you send some kind of validation. But also when we can enable the confirmation dialog. So every time someone clicks, it actually asks if we are sure about clicking this button. Okay, I'll save. Now going back to the analysis, we actually have some additional steps. And one of them is to generate our environment variable. And for this analysis, they are asking us to have the account token in the environment variable. So going to my environment variable here, I can enter the key account token. This is specified here. And I need to generate now my account token. So in order to do that, let me open another tab here. The account token will be in your profile settings. So by clicking the up corner here, going to my profiles, I can go to webinar, I can go to tokens, and now I have the tokens from my profile webinar here. So I will copy one. Make sure when you generate token for analysis that you change the expire here to never. Otherwise, your token will expire or end, your analysis will stop working eventually. So going back to the analysis, we can enter our environment variable here and press save. And there is no more additional parameters. So this is all we need to do to set up this dashboard. And now let's try to understand the code and how this all works. Okay, let's try to create a device here and see what happens. Let's say it's a test one, and we can enter a UI here and press create. Okay, device successfully created. I go to the list, my sensor is showing up here automatically for me. And you can see we have more devices in the account, right? We have Brown, leak detections here, we're using Evernet, and we have our just created device. So why they are not showing up here? Let me show you how this device list work. Okay, so we have the device list widget. And the first thing you want to set up in this device is the device list filter. So here you can see it was set up to only show up devices that has the tag key type and the tag value sensor. And if I go to my device, you can see it does have the tag key type with the value sensor. And we can also do a tag match blueprint. So for example, if our setting device has the tag customer, just an example, we can have a tag match. So our device should also have the tag customer, and the value from our settings device blueprint need to match the value from the sensor here in order to show up for this list. It's basically what I mentioned, I talked about in the webinar one, in the part one, when talking about tag match. So in this case, you are tag matching your blueprint device with your device list. Very good to do. Very cool to do. Now you have columns here. So taking the first one, you have the device data, that is information regarding your device. And for this column, it's set to show the device information. You can see how it can show up tags and configuration parameters. And regarding device information, we want to show the name. So we can do that and create additional tags here. For example, I want to show the network. Okay, so I can move around and add the header here, network. So this is basically how it works. It can also show up tag key. So you can see that our analysis generates a tag for our device. That is the device UI. So this is for us to be able to show up this information in this widget, because the widgets can only show up device information, and it's just quite a few fields, tags and configuration parameter. So that means you will need to set up some tags for UI if you want to show up UI in your widget. So I can press save here. I believe this is all regarding the device list. Okay, so I have the network showing up now. Cool. Now let's get back to our analysis and see what happened. Okay, so we have some console logs here saying exactly what happened, just instructions. And the first line here, we can see that we do not have, this analysis should not trigger or run if we do not receive a scope. So this is very good for you to do a few things to warn you that your analysis is running in a different way that you expect it to run. Just so you don't start seeing errors and don't know what does that error means. So this handle the error and tell me exactly what is happening. So one example I can do, it should not have a scope, and try to run this code now. So my error show up here, and I have some understanding what's happening. Then we have this field here, these lines here that convert my environment variables that come from context.environment. As you can see here, it's an array. It converts my context environment to a JSON. So basically what that means is that our env, I'm not writing code here, I choose for visualization, is an array, and actually it comes as a key. So for example, I have an account token there. With values. So for example, I can say 12333. So with this, what this function do is it actually converts our environment variables to something more easy to use, like account token. And with that is much more easier because we can just access the account token by accessing a property of this variable. So this is how it works. We also have the account class instanced here with the account token you have from our environment variable. And then we have the unchoose function, and we use the await because all these are promises. Let me show quickly here. If I go to buckets, for example, let's say devices, go to the devices and click create. You can see most of the response from your functions is actually a promise. So promises means all these functions are asynchronous, and you need to use the await when you call these methods. We have choose get token by name. It expects to receive the account class and the scope origin, or actually the ID of the device. So, but in this case, we can access any position from the scope to get the ID of the device that comes from the origin parameter inside your variable. So there's no origin here, but you can see from here. Okay, so you can see here you have an origin and will always contain the ID of your device. Okay, now we get from our scope and we try to find the variables we set up for our input form. So I did show you later that we set device network for the variable in the input form widget for network, same thing for connector, device name, and UI. And it will always be, and if it finds the variable, so you have, for example, variable temperature. So in this case, we are trying to find device UI. The find method will return the entire object for us. So for now, device UI, I can access with device UI.value to get the value. I could use variable to get the variable. Siri, if I have a Siri for this data, or location, I can access this variable this way now. And here we have our first use of the devices function. So you can see that the way we write this code is exactly the way we access the information in the SDK documentation. So you have the accounts. So if I go back to the beginning, first thing you click is the account. Then you have a dot devices. So I can click dot the devices here, and I can click device here again to access. And then we have the create, that is our method. And when we say method, this means we already need to use the function. And the create expects to receive this object is a device create information. And if I click here, I can see all the properties and what these properties means, and if it's optional or is not optional. And so if I go back to the analysis here, I am sending the name that is from our form, the serial number, and the serial number is used for any kind of serial or EUA. And this parameter will never change. It will as the UA for your token for this device. And if you are using Sigfox, for example, it will be your Sigfox ID, but you keep using the same parameter. And here you can see we create our tags. So it's creating the tags we need for the device list we created with type sensor and also the device UI in the tag, so we can show up for the column in the device list. We also send the connector selected, the network selected, and active true. And if any error happens during this transaction, we actually using the dashboard device. So this is exactly why we have this code to get the token from the device that was used for the dashboard, and then instance the device class here. This is why we use it. So we can now send data to the validation variable and give some feedback for the user. And we can see here we can customize this information by using the metadata from the variable, sending the color red. We also have some additional code here, so we can set configuration parameters if you want to, or not. We can comment this if you don't want to set configuration parameters. And we can also get the tokens. So the result of this function, if success, of course, will give us a token that is the device token from the just generated device. And you can use this token and send data for the device. So you can have some initial data, maybe, it depends on what you want to do. And for last, we are just sending a validation saying to our customer that the device was successfully created. Okay. So that's all regarding the analysis here. Thiago, do we have any questions?
Yes, Vitor, very cool. Thank you for the presentation. This was a great conclusion to part one. Just to mention it again, everybody, this is the second part of this webinar. We're going to be uploading to on the website. We have part one already there. And we have one question here on the Q&A, which goes like this. What will be the procedure that I should do if what I want is that from a push button on the dashboard, I can send a payload to the Things network for a LoRa application in order to activate and deactivate an end device?
So this question is regarding downlinks, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, TagoIO actually gives you a snippet example for doing downlinks. Okay, sending downlinks using dashboard. So we have a snippet here. So you need to follow all the quick steps here. But basically what you need to understand from this code, so it receives your account token and gets the payload from your widget or from the environment variable if you don't want to have this in a widget. Then get your ID. But basically what I want to show you is the end of the code here. So we are using a library called Axios. And if you check the analysis documentation, you see all the libraries we support natively. So you don't need to build a webpack. You can just require in your code and start using. And what this code actually do is it gets the information of the endpoint for the network you are using. So if you are using TTN, Ethernet, it will get the endpoint from Tago to send downlinks. And we'll send the downlink containing your device, authorization, payload, and port. The same thing can, this is the method to use Tago to send your downlink, of course. But if you have a different service to do downlinks, or for some reason you want to do your own integration and not go through the TagoIO middlewares and network supports, you can just come here and enter your URL, create your own data, send your header, and basically do your HTTPS post to your network server. Just want to exemplify how free this is for you to build your analysis and do exactly what you are trying to do. And in this case, for downlinks and using Tago support for downlinks, you need to make sure that you have this analysis set up. You can get the templates and set up the same way I did for the device create is exactly how this will work. You get the template, you'll have some button options, and you will need to edit some widgets in order to say to the widget that you want to trigger this analysis, because as I mentioned, the analysis needs to be triggered some way. And also make sure you follow the console here. So you can see all these errors here. So if it's throwing some error, it means something is not properly set up. Or in some cases, if the network do not support downlinks, you also have this information here. And also make sure you have your authorization filled up with the additional parameters. Almost all the networks need you to enter something here. Okay, does that answer his question?
Thank you, Victor. That was very clear. I hope that answers the question. I see that we don't have any questions left, so I would like to thank everybody for joining us. And I would like to thank Victor for this presentation. And as soon as we have another webinar coming up, we will make the advertisement. And to stay tuned, you can always go to our website, tago.io/events, to stay tuned to any other webinars coming up and events and how-tos. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you again.